Many thanks to Pandemonium, Fatal Attraction Vanilla servers, Atlas, One Original DayZ servers, Clash Vanilla servers, Sheriff Line, Sauerkraut, Sgt. Pepper's DayZ Invasion server, PGZ servers, Chinese Cream Vanilla servers, Tequila, and CF Tools Cloud for making this video possible. DayZ 1.24 has significantly increased the recoil of several weapons many times over, but they've also made other weapons much more stable this patch too. So in this video we're going to look over the 10 weapons that have had their recoil and stability changed, explain how diminishing returns works on recoil reducing attachments, and rank the easiest and hardest weapons to control in DayZ. To fully understand the changes to recoil in 1.24, we must first understand how recoil works on weapons and the major differences that we haven't discussed yet between recoil and stability. Recoil in DayZ is extremely random, but it's also not extremely random at the same time. This is why we need a new stat called stability to give us a way to view how random a recoil pattern is in DayZ. In its most basic form, recoil is the kick you get upwards or diagonally, and it goes very consistently in a straight line in DayZ. It's quite simple. Nearly all weapons are like this, they're very straight. Stability, on the other hand, is how much the recoil pattern deviates from this line, creating a lot of randomness in the direction of recoil. So the lower the stability on a weapon is, the more uncertain the path of recoil will be. Or to visually demonstrate this is the recoil, and the thicker the line is, the more unstable a weapon is. Now, most weapons in DayZ have a fairly thin line of recoil, especially if they have attachments on, so pulling your joystick or mouse in the opposite direction, you can easily predict this type of recoil here. The VSS, for example, this is an easy recoil pattern, but as soon as you mix the randomness of stability in there, all hell breaks loose, and the control of your weapon will significantly reduce. Both recoil and stability are affected an equal amount by attachments, so you can reduce this randomness using recoil reducing attachments, but the more you use, the more the benefits of using each one will diminish. For example, this is the M4 with only a magazine. With all magazines in DayZ, if you didn't know, reducing recoil and instability by 5%, resulting in the recoil pattern that you can see here. In adding some more attachments and getting it down to 45% and a huge 75% here, the amount of recoil reduced is making less of a difference the more that you have. So this means that it's impossible to reach zero, but it also means that the more recoil reduction you have on your weapon, the less it will mean, and therefore you should only have the amount that you need to get the job done. A lot of weapons in DayZ are laser beams already, and you might not even need the recoil reduction on there, so having a balanced sway reduction weapon and a recoil reduction weapon might be best for you if you can control that recoil initially. Now that we understand the differences between recoil and stability in DayZ, we can go over the changes in 1.24 by showing the recoil kick changes of the 10 weapons and the stability changes of these 10 weapons too, so we're going to have them separately. The Orgay 1 and Orgay X both have the exact same recoil stats in DayZ, so both had their recoil kick increased by 16.6%, but the instability of these weapons got reduced too, making them 28% less random, so the potential recoil path is 28% tighter, but they will travel across this path 16.6% faster. The LAR got a 22% decrease to its recoil kick this patch, so it means it's going to travel across this path 22% slower, so less downwards force is going to be needed to control this weapon, but at the same time it got 15% more randomness, so how it travels across this path 15% more random, resulting, I would say, in a net nerf for the LAR. The ST5K upwards kick didn't get any changes this patch, but the instability of this weapon has been increased by 41%, meaning that the path of recoil is going to be a lot more random this patch, with recoil reducing attachments still making this weapon very stable, so with the right attachments the ST5K is still going to be a laser beam. The Bison, or PP19 in this patch, has exactly double the amount of recoil it had last patch, 100% more recoil, especially noticeable and visible here as you can see, with its instability also being increased by 29%, so the recoil on this weapon has been demolished, resulting in a Bison that is much more difficult to control than this patch, but because it has 600 RPM, it's not too difficult if you are resisting the recoil. The Vega saw a huge reduction to its recoil, its kick recoil that is, by 47%, so it basically has half the recoil it had last patch, and that's just recoil reduction, the vertical recoil, with no changes to how unstable this weapon is. The Vega is really unstable, so it's still very difficult to predict the recoil path of the Vega, but the reduced RPM does allow you more time to compensate for the instability of the weapon, now firing at 300 RPM instead of 450 last patch. While the Vega has seen the biggest buff when it comes to recoil, the Scorpion has seen the biggest nerf in 1.24 when it comes to recoil, which used to be a laser beam in the previous patch. Recoil kick has been increased by 25% this patch, and also instability has been increased by a huge 175%, making it very unpredictable compared to what it once was. The UMP or USG is up next, which is probably the reason that Recoil got looked into this patch, because this weapon is an absolute laser beam. It has been for a long time. It had extremely low recoil kick. Now it has 380% more recoil kick upwards, which you can see here. This is a massive difference from the last patch, with an increase to instability 2 of 27%, which isn't a lot. The recoil kick on this weapon has been majorly nerfed though. The final two weapons to get recoil changes are the VSS and the AS-VAL. So the new Vakir has this recoil pattern too. They're all the same when it comes to recoil. From the last patch, it's up 16% more with no stability changes, so only 16% increased recoil. These weapons are still very easy to control. Due to how recoil kick and stability draw the recoil path in DayZ, these two stats must be combined to determine which weapons have the easiest or the hardest recoil to control. Luckily, I have done this for you. To do this, I created a tool that merges multiple stats into 5 very simple consolidated stats, with one of those consolidated stats being control, which is simply a combination of the two stats that we're talking about in this video, recoil kick and stability, giving us rankings of the easiest and hardest weapons to control in DayZ. For the easiest weapons to control in DayZ, then in 5th place we have the AK family with the wooden recoil reducing attachment and with the suppressor on there as well, but not the AKS-74U. It doesn't allow a handguard, but has the exact same recoil numbers as the AKM 101 and 74. It is certainly harder to control, but these weapons with the correct attachments are laser beams. In 4th place, again with the best recoil reducing attachments, is the M4, the RIS handguard and the CQB stock, and the suppressor of course, reduces recoil up to 75, so this is going to reduce your recoil by about 60% in total. It makes the M4 much easier to control. 3rd place goes to the free 9x39 weapons, making for an extremely easy to control weapon if you do have one of these. In 2nd place is the MK2, with 1st place also being a 22 weapon, the Sporter 22, which has almost no recoil and is the easiest to control weapon in the game. The 5 hardest weapons to control, starting in 5th place, the F&X pistol. To my surprise, this weapon is not easy to control if you're spam firing this. In 4th place, again to my surprise, is the Derringer pistol. That second shot is pure randomness. The kick is quite moderate too for such a small weapon. I'm surprised this has such instability. The 3rd worst weapon to control in DayZ is the BK-43 or the double barrel shotgun. It doesn't matter which shells you're firing. Again, watch out for that second shot. A centered chest shot can result in the second shot, the instability, pushing your weapon away from your target. So your second shot might not hit your target at all. The 2nd worst weapon to control in DayZ then is the Vega, which got a massive buff this patch, but it's still 2nd worst. It's still not easy to control due to the instability stat on this weapon. The instability is exactly the same as last patch, but due to the recoil reduction, as I said earlier, you can compensate for the randomness slightly more this patch. The worst weapon in DayZ then for control is, as you might have guessed, the BK-43, but the sawed-off version, having the same stats as a regular BK-43, but sawing off a double barrel shotgun will increase the recoil kick and the instability by 100%, so it doubles the recoil and the instability. Firing both shots quickly isn't recommended unless you're point blank range. You need to be within 2 meters to not have the second shot miss. The BK-12 has the same recoil stats as a BK-43 sawed off or regular, but because it only fires 1 shot, you don't really need control on a weapon that fires 1 shot, and this applies to all weapons that only fire 1 shot at a time. Now these numbers are merely a guide to give us a basic understanding of the control on a weapon. The other stats here do the exact same. This tool compares 5 consolidated stats on 4 weapons at a time, and I believe is great for beginners or lazy ones among us that don't care too much about the complexity of DayZ weapon stats. It is complicated. There's a lot of stats going on here. To compress it down into these 5 stats, I believe is going to be fantastic for beginners. And also this radar chart, you can just look at it once and you can see how a weapon performs in DayZ. Link below if you do want to check that out. You can also find the attachment recoil and sway modifier numbers on this website too. They're all listed. Or if you don't want to look at that, you can just watch this video that goes over the best and worst attachments in DayZ. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.